In previous lecture, we studied how we can able to obtain fluid film bearing linearized stiffness and damping coefficient. These coefficients play important role in stability of the rotor system. So today we will see how we can able to find out if we know these coefficients, dynamic coefficients of the bearing, how we can able to find out the instability of the system. That means through some criteria we can able to pinpoint that the system is stable or not. So in this particular case, let us see what are the things we will be covering. So basically we will be covering the instability in rotor bearing system due to fluid film bearing, how we can able to obtain whether the system is stable or not. Apart from this, we will introduce basic concepts. This we already linearized dynamic coefficients we introduced. So we will be using this for finding the stability of the rotor system. This particular criteria, Rotor-Hurwitz criteria of stability, will be using it for this purpose. Before going into the stability aspect of the fluid film bearing, let us see in rotor bearing system what are the various source of instability we can have. So most common is the fluid film bearing. We know that in the forced vibration, the most common force is the unbalanced force, and in instability, the most common source is the fluid film bearings. Apart from that, seals are there. They also give instability, especially at high speed rotor applications. Shaft stiffness asymmetry, this also gives instability in the rotor system. Apart from this, internal friction or hysteretic damping, or even the damping between two mating components in a rotor can give instability. These instability with simple model of rotor will try to investigate in detail in subsequent lectures. Another important instability is the steam whirl. This particular instability is mainly occurs in high pressure turbines, and generally this steam whirl limits the how much power we can able to generate from turbine, because this particular phenomena starts when the turbines are having very high pressure. Apart from that, aerodynamical forces which comes onto the blades gives instability. So these instability one by one we will be studying. In today's lecture, we will study the fluid film bearing instability. So before going to the instability, let us understand what is self-excited vibration. We know that the excitation can come from external source, and that is we call it as unbalance or any other kind of forced vibration system. The self-excited vibration is something in which the force comes from the motion of the system itself. So to understand this, let us take a rotor system like this. So this is a simple rotor, Jeffcott rotor, and in this there is a disc at the center which is having some unbalance. If we rotate this particular rotor, then it will start whirling. If let us say these bearings are not there, then it will start whirling because of the unbalance. Now if we want to stop the motion of this particular disc by providing this kind of two bearings very close to the disc, if we provide this, obviously the motion of this particular disc will be arrested. This will not be having any vibration because now this particular rolling bearing is not allowing to have whirling of this particular disc. but because unbalance is rotating, because the shaft is rotating, the force will still be there in the system. The unbalanced force will be there, that will not diminish because of stopping the motion. In other case, the same rotor, which is now let us say perfectly balanced rotor is there, is mounted on fluid film bearing. Let us say at present initially these two rolling bearings are not there, so only it is mounted on two fluid film bearing, and rotor is balanced perfectly. Now if let us say the property of the bearings are such that the system is under unstable region, that means at that particular speed it is having large oscillations. Now and that is even because there is no unbalance, no external force, the system is getting excited because of self excited vibration from the parameter of the bearing itself, because it is stable in the unstable zone. Now if we try to arrest the motion of this particular shaft at the ends by providing a rolling element bearing and fixing that particular rolling bearing with some kind of stator here, so we are preventing the motion of the shaft ends by providing these two bearings. Then we will see that when we are stopping the motion of the shaft ends, the whatever the self excited force was generating earlier, that will also diminish, that will dies down, so that will not be present. So you can able to see that this self excited vibration due to the fluid film bearing will take place only when the motion of the shaft ends are there. If we arrest the motion of the shaft, the self excited vibration will automatically it will die down. So now it is very clear what is the difference between the self excited vibration and a external excitation. So in this particular case we have seen that the self excitation vibration will in fact the motion will generate this particular kind of vibration. Now let us see how we can able to analyze this particular case. We have seen that how the self excited vibration generates, and we have seen that when the motion take place, then only this particular excitation can be there in the system. And let us try to analyze this particular system in terms of the positive damping and negative damping in the system. So when there is a positive damping in the system, we know that if the system is perfectly balanced, if we disturb the system by some small amount in the form of either giving a small displacement or a small tap, the system will come to its steady state position after some time. So that means if we have, let us say, some disturbance of the system at t time is equal to 0, we expect if damping is positive, the system response will gradually dies down like this. So this is a stable system. Now if we have a negative damping, in negative damping what happens generally in positive damping, at every cycle some energy of the system is dissipated as in the form of energy, and the system energy is getting reduced. So we have amplitude which is gradually decreasing with time. In the negative damping case, this is a positive damping. In negative damping case, we expect this opposite of the positive damping. That means at every cycle we expect that there will be increase in the energy of the system. So whatever the disturbance if we give, after some time we will find that the amplitude will grow like this, and for linear system we expect this amplitude will become infinity after some time. So this is the equation of motion. For this we can able to write it as for negative damping case like this, and since free vibration response of such is given as e raised to c by 2m t. This is the exponential part, and then the harmonic part is this one. Where omega nf is nothing but root k by m, undamped natural frequency. So you can able to see if this when this is negative, the exponential term is exponentially it will be increasing. So in this particular curve, this will be that particular plot in which this is exponential function. And for the stable system, we have our equation of motion as like this, and in this case x will be minus c by 2m t, and this term is exactly same as this one. So you can able to see here is minus, so we have exponentially decaying curve for this case. So this is the exponential but decaying because of the negative term in the here. So we can able to see that how the negative damping gives instability into the system, and this particular damping, we know that if motion stops, there is no damping force. When there is no motion, obviously the damping force will not be present because velocity will be 0. So this particular concept of negative damping is identical to the previous concept in which we described the self-excited vibration, that if motion stops, there is no self-excited vibration. So in this particular case also, you can able to see with this concept also the same is true. When there is no motion, the self-excited vibration will not be there. So by two different concepts, we have seen the self-excited vibration concept. Now let us see at what particular frequency this self-excited vibration will take place, because in this particular case we assume that there is no external force in the system. Whatever the vibration is taking place in the self-excited condition is due to the internal forces. So we expect the system will be having the frequency same as the world frequency of the system, or damped natural frequency of the system, and we can able to see that the damped natural frequency we related with the undamped one earlier like this. So where this is the damping ratio. So if damping is there either positive or negative, because this square term, or the damped natural frequency will be always decreasing. So we can able to see that the world frequency during self-excited vibration will be the damped natural frequency, and in this particular case zeta is very small generally. So we expect that whatever the world damping is there, the damped natural frequency is there, that will be very close to the undamped natural frequency of the system, which we defined as root k by m. So in this particular case, now Let us see in the terms of energy. When we have positive damping in the system, we expect that every cycle the energy of the system decreases. If we disturb the system, every cycle the energy of the system will decrease, and it will, after some time, it will come to the steady state condition. In the negative damping, we expect the every cycle the energy of the system will increase. So gradually the amplitude will grow in this particular case. So energy is also growing, so amplitude will also grow, because energy is something like square of the amplitude. Like in the case of we have strain energy. So strain energy is square of the displacement, or kinetic energy, that is square of the velocity. So basically because this, for simple harmonic motion, we can able to write again in the form of displacement. So energies are nothing but something like square of the amplitude of the vibration. So we expect that the energy, if we want to plot with respect to the amplitude, that will be a parabolic in nature. So let us see how we can able to plot, let us say, amplitude is there, and this is the energy per cycle. This is energy per cycle. For negative damping, we will be having parabola like this. For positive damping, because in the system this negative damping and positive damping exist simultaneously and independent of each other. So this is corresponding to negative damping, and this is corresponding to positive damping. If our amplitude is at A, let us say, so we can able to see that if amplitude is relatively small, and at here the energy here is more than the energy which is dissipated. So this is the energy input in one cycle, and this is the energy dissipated in one cycle. So we have surplus energy from here to here, and because of this we expect that the amplitude will grow. So amplitude will come somewhere here. So here also the energy input per cycle is from here to here, and energy dissipated is this much. Still surplus of energy is there. So again we expect the amplitude will grow toward this side. Now let us say this particular plot I am drawing again. So let us say we are somewhere here. So in this particular case we can able to see that this is the energy which is getting inside the system, but this is the energy from here to here which is getting into the system, out of the system. So the dissipation of the energy is in this particular case is more, because positive damping dissipate the energy. So from here to here the energy is getting dissipated, that is more. So this much energy is getting dissipated in this particular cycle. So we expect that the amplitude which is B here will go toward this side. So here amplitude is less, but still the energy of dissipation is more than the energy of input to the system here. So again it will go toward this side. So the tendency of the system, either from this side is going toward this, or if we are here, is going toward this, and this is the position where these two energies are same at the intersection of these two curves. So here whatever the energy is getting into the system is equal to which is dissipated from the system. So, net damping in this particular amplitude will be effectively 0, because the net energy is 0 into the system is 0. So, at this particular case, the system will be having a constant amplitude. So, this is something like steady state vibration will take place. The amplitude will be having some value, and sometime in nonlinear vibration it is called limit cycle. So, you can able to see there is no unbalance in the system, there is no force in the system, but still this particular system is having some finite amplitude, and that is the system is having vibrations at that particular amplitude. In this particular case, whatever we have studied, because we for negative damping we said the energy is going into the system, and we are saying there is no unbalanced force or there is no external force, but there has to be some source of energy from where the system can extract the energy. So, the energy can be in the form of pressure of the water or steam, or maybe wind pressure, or any such source of energy should be there from where the system can extract the energy. There may not be any excitation force frequency, but only the energy should be there in the form, so that the system can take the energy from there, so that it can have self-excited vibration. Now, we will study two very important phenomena in the fluid film bearing, which take place because of instability. One is the oil whirl and another is the oil whip. They are somewhat related. So, let us see how they take place. So, in a Campbell diagram, I am showing this particular phenomena. So, the horizontal axis is the shaft whirl frequency, and the vertical axis is the shaft and the spin speed or the rotational speed. When we are starting the rotor at low speed in the zone A, in this particular case we can able to see this is 1x line. That means along this line we have the frequency of speed and the whirls are same. Basically, this is synchronous whirl condition, that is 1x of the rotational frequency, shaft rotational frequency. So, if there is unbalance in the system, we expect those amplitude will be present in this particular region. This line is twice of the shaft rotational speed. Generally, if rotor is mounted on fluid film bearing, we do not expect any amplitude along this line. The vibration frequency will not be having the frequency equal to twice the rotational frequency in this region. So, only unbalanced amplitude will be present, and when we reach here, this is the natural frequency of the system. So, when the speed is equal to the natural frequency of the system, this is the resonance condition, this is the critical speed. So, we expect very large amplitude of vibration here, which is equal to the natural frequency of the system, and because the rotor is rotating at the same speed. So, we have at 1x rotational frequency this amplitude, but if we see in the 2x of the shaft rotational frequency, there also there is a small amplitude of vibration. If we increase the speed further, this whirl frequency, this at half this particular speed, they are having these amplitudes. As we see in the 1x line, the amplitude we expect will be decreasing gradually. If you increase the speed, because the critical speed is here, if we increase further speed, we expect the amplitude corresponding to 1x will be decreasing gradually. But in this particular case, you can able to see these amplitudes are growing and their frequency is half the speed of the rotor. So, rotor is at the critical speed, but the frequency of the whirl is at the half of the whirl frequency, and as we are growing, that is always corresponding to the half of the whirl frequency it is taking place. If we increase the speed up to the twice the natural frequency, so this particular point is twice the natural frequency. Natural frequency is this, twice of this here. So, the rotor is rotating now at twice the rotor speed, and in this particular speed we do not expect much vibration in the 1x component, but here we have very large amplitude of vibration. Let me define these amplitude. These are called oil whirl. These amplitudes are relatively smaller. Oil whirls phenomena are not so dangerous as compared to this particular condition, in which we are rotating the rotor at twice the speed of the critical speed, and because of that at this position the whirling frequency is equal to the natural frequency of the system. You can able to see this whirling frequency is equal to natural frequency of the system, and this is more dangerous. And even if we increase the speed of the rotor further, the oil whip the frequency get locked to the natural frequency of the system. Here it will not follow this particular line, but it will lock to the value of the natural frequency, and this is the oil whip, which is far more dangerous condition in which catastrophic failure of the rotor bearing system can take place. So, now these two phenomena are very clear. Basically, oil whip is a very special condition of the oil whirl itself. At oil whirl, basically we are rotating the rotor around the twice of the critical speed, and because of that the frequency of whirl is equal to the natural frequency of the system itself, and this is more dangerous. More dangerous instability conditions. This particular phenomena of oil whirl and oil whip is basically nonlinear in nature, and we can able to analyze them only through the nonlinear analysis through the Reynolds equation. In the subsequent slides, I will be showing how we can able to get these amplitudes with the help of the pressure variations in the fluid film bearing. So, some glimpse of the procedure I will be showing, so that if we need to analyze this system, how the Reynolds equation can help us in finding out the this particular phenomena. Now, through very simple linear analysis, we will try to understand the oil whirl condition, and in this particular case we expect that the system should be very light and it should be rotating at a relatively slow speed, and in this particular case, let us say so we are considering this particular rotor bearing system. As I told, the speed should be relatively low, and the weight of the rotor should be smaller. So, in this particular case, we expect the rotor will be having very low eccentricity. So, let us consider this is a rotor which is inside the bearing. In between this there is a fluid, and the fluid is having motion because of the motion of the shaft. We are not considering the variation of the pressure due to the hydrodynamic action. Only we are assuming that the motion of the fluid is taking place because of the motion rotation of the shaft. So, basically the shaft is whirling in this position. So this is the center of the shaft, which is whirling like this. So in this particular configuration, because now we can able to see this is the eccentricity of the shaft ER, and the spin speed of the shaft is omega. So the tangential velocity of the rotor in this particular position, that means at the center of the shaft, the tangential velocity of that will be m omega ER. So in this particular configuration, that velocity will be toward the downward direction. This particular circle, that is the world orbit of the shaft center, we are analyzing here. So you can able to see there are two motions of the rotor. One is spinning about its own axis, and then it is whirling in this direction. And because it is spinning, so the velocity of the fluid here will be same as the rotor velocity. Here it will be 0 because this particular bearing is stationary, and in between we can assume that the variation of the velocity of the fluid is linear. Similarly, here also, here velocity will be equal to the velocity of the rotor, and here it will be 0, and in between we can assume this linearly varying, because in this particular case rotor is rotating anticlockwise direction. So we expect that the fluid will come from this portion in the downward direction, and in this it will go toward the upward direction. Now because this O is the bearing center, C is the center of the shaft, is slightly offset, and clearance is CR, total clearance. So that means when the C and O are at the same place, we have clearance in both sides, they are equal, that is equal to CR. But now we have displaced the rotor toward this side by ER. So we expect that this length will be CR plus ER, and this length will be CR minus ER. Now we are trying to calculate what is the volume of the fluid which is going here and here, and how much the volume of the space which this particular shaft will be creating here because of the motion in the downward direction, and will be equating these three volumes. So let us say we are considering what is the volume of the fluid which is going inside the upper half of this particular bearing. So this is Qn. So Qn we can able to obtain as this is the average velocity, because r omega is the velocity of the fluid here. So first is the average velocity, half on this, and this into, let us say, depth of the bearing is 1. So this distance into 1 will give us the average area through which this fluid is flowing. So this will be the input volume of the fluid which is going from this side. From this side we will be having same velocity, but this distance is now CR into ER. So this is the area through which this volume is passing, so fluid is passing. So this will be the fluid which is going out. Now because of the motion of the shaft which is going down toward the downward direction, if we see, so here this is the whirling motion. So basically whirling, the frequency is, let us say, nu, and if nu is the whirling frequency of the rotor, and if we multiply by the ER, that will be the velocity of the journal which will be going toward the downward direction. Now we are taking nu as some factor of speed of the rotor. This factor we don't know, n. So that's why here the downward motion of the rotor we have taken as, if we substitute this n omega ER, and this is the quantity, is the n omega ER is the velocity of the journal, and projected area is 2r into the depth is unity. So that is the volume it is getting created in the upper half. Now the difference in the volume in and out should be equal to this particular volume which the journal is creating. If we equate this 3 volume and solve it, we will see that n is equal to 0.5. That means the world frequency is equal to 0.5 of the speed of the rotor. This we have seen in the previous Campbell diagram, that the world frequency due to the this oil whirl take place at approximately half of the spin speed of the rotor. In practice, people have found that this particular factor n is it varies from 0.46 to 0.48, and the difference is due to because in theoretical calculation we assume the motion of the fluid only due to the motion of the shaft, but there will be pressure gradient that we have not considered, and because of that this particular difference of the theoretical and the experimental is there. So, if there is a pressure gradient, the fluid flow will take place because of that also, and if we incorporate that also in the analysis, then we can expect we can get this particular factor as 0.46 to this in this particular range. Now, we will study how we can able to find out the stability of the system of a rotor bearing system using the linearized stiffness and damping coefficient. So, we will be studying basically Rotor-Hurwitz criteria of stability, and in this particular case we are taking very simple rotor model. So, let us say there is a rotor, the mass of the rotor is, let us say, 2 m, is mounted on two identical fluid film bearing. Their properties are identical, and this is basically a model using all 8 linearized stiffness and damping coefficient as we discussed in the previous class. Now, if we draw the free body diagram of this rotor, we will see that the fluid film forces in the x and y direction will be given by this. So, this is basically fluid film forces in the x direction, and in this we will be having contribution from stiffness as well as damping terms, and because cross coupled damping is and stiffness is also there, so those terms will also be there. Similarly, in the y direction we will be having this. Now, the same thing is drawn here. So, this is a free body diagram of the rotor in this particular plane, one of the plane, let us say YZ plane. So, in this YZ plane we will be having bearing force in from this bearing and this bearing. They are having similar coefficients, so they look alike. And similarly, in this is the free body diagram in the ZX plane, and this is basically you can able to see because of the cross coupled stiffness and damping, both x and y are appearing in this. So, we can able to now write the equation of motion using this, because we have taken the mass of the rotor as 2 m. So, basically we will be getting very simple equation like this. So, external force is equal to inertia. By that we can able to obtain this equation of motion. Now, because there is no unbalance in the system, so let us take the solution of the response in x and y direction as amplitude and some frequency lambda t. We can take the derivatives of these two and we can substitute in the equation of motion. So, basically now we will be getting this equation and all the time dependent terms will vanish. In this, the lambda will be there. So, now you can able to see basically this is a homogeneous equation. Now, we can able to write them in more compact form like this. So, all the x term are collected in one place and y in other place. So, these two equations we will be getting, basically they are homogeneous equation. So, we can able to put them in a matrix form like this, and because this is homogeneous, for non-trivial solution determinant of this should be 0. So, if we take the determinant of this matrix 0, we will get a polynomial, 4th degree polynomial in terms of lambda, and the polynomial will be of having this form. So, each and every term of the lambda will be having some coefficients, and these coefficients basically will help us in finding out the stability of the system. So, generally, because in general this lambda, the roots of this will be complex, it will be having both real and imaginary parts, and so we got a fourth degree polynomial, and that will help us in finding the instability of the system. Now, I am generalizing this particular polynomial and will try to find out the condition for which the system will be stable. So, this is the general form of that particular polynomial which we obtain, and this is n plus 1 degree polynomial. So, for the previous case basically we will be having n is equal to 3. For stability of this particular linear system, we will be having these conditions. So, all the coefficients of the characteristic equation must have the same sign. This is the necessary condition. That means all these a's should have same sign, then the system will be stable. For sufficient condition, each of the following determinants must be positive. That means if we R1, R2, R3, R4, Rn, these are the determinants. If they are more positive, then we will be having the system is stable. So, you can able to see these are the coefficients of the polynomial, and if we take the determinant, these determinants should be positive to have stability of the system. This is called Rotor-Hurwitz criteria. The same criteria in a tabular form is given like this for the linear system only. In this particular case, because this is very small, so I am enlarging only 2 columns of the previous one. Other 2 columns I will be showing subsequently. So, first 3 columns I have shown here. So, these are the lambda n plus 1, lambda n like this up to lambda naught. This is a n plus 1, this is the coefficient of the polynomial a n minus 1, a n minus 2. Basically, in this we have recalculated various coefficients like b n, c n, and the condition of the Routes table is that the first column coefficient after calculation should not have any change in the sign. If there is change in the sign, then the system will be unstable. So, like bn we have calculated based on the previous coefficients. So, a minus 1 minus a n plus 1 and a minus 2 divided by a n. So, this quantity is defined as bn. Similarly, bn minus 1, cn minus 1. So, these have been defined, and if we calculate this, these coefficients should not have change in the sign. So, now I will be showing the third and fourth column. So, like continuation of the previous one was a n minus 1, a minus 3, a minus 2, a n minus 4 like this, and here b n minus 1, c n minus. So, all these coefficients have been defined based on the previous coefficients that can be calculated, but only we need to see in the first column, this particular column, there should not be any change in the sign. Now, through very simple example, let us see this particular Rotor-Hurwitz criteria. So, in this particular case, we have taken very simple rotor model of 10 kg supported on 2 identical bearings. The properties of the bearings are given here. We need to find out the stability of the rotor system. So, we can able to substitute all these parameter in the polynomial which we obtained earlier, for the 4th degree polynomial which we obtained earlier for the rotor system similar to this. So, various coefficient can be obtained. So, basically substitute the various values of the stiffness and damping and mass of the rotor, and basically we will get this polynomial having coefficients given like this. This is the 4th degree polynomial. Now, we will apply the Routh-Hurwitz criteria for 4th degree. So, R1 is this one, they determined. First criteria is all the coefficients should be same sign. So, you can able to see they are of same sign. So, necessary condition is satisfied. Now, next is this determinant should be positive. So, you can able to see R1, R2, R3 they are positive. So, by this we can able to conclude that the system is stable. Now, same thing with Routh table we can able to calculate. So, like now in place of this coefficient I have given the numbers also, and with these formulas we can able to calculate these coefficients in this particular column, and we can able to see that all are positive in this case also. So, by this we can able to conclude that the system is stable, and if there is a sign change in any of this, then the system will be unstable. Today we have seen instability of the rotor system, especially for fluid film bearing. Initially we introduced various instability sources in the rotor bearing system, and we pointed out that the most common source of the instability is the fluid film bearing. And for fluid film bearing, especially for the linearized stiffness and damping coefficient, we provided a method of Routh-Hurwitz criteria by which we can able to find out the stability of the system. That means using this parameter we can able to find out a priori whether the system will be stable or unstable. In subsequent lectures we will be analyzing other kind of instability one by one, and in this case always we will be taking very simple rotor model, so that we can able to go in more insight into the problem, especially the physics of the problem we can able to understand.